The house was quiet now. It had grown into a different kind of silence over the past 2 years, a stillness that was no longer just about grief, but a tender kind of remembrance. The curtains fluttered with the spring breeze, and the smell of lavender from the garden drifted in, wrapping around me like a memory. I had lived a life full of care and constancy, love and loyalty, and loss. And now, for the first time in decades, I found myself standing at the edge of something unknown, something terrifying, beautiful, and long overdue. This is not a story about infidelity or betrayal. It's a story about time, about the way it slips past us, sometimes like water through fingers, sometimes like thunder through the soul. It's a story about the promises we keep and the feelings we bury deep to keep them. And it's a story about finding courage in the autumn of one's life to speak the truth we've carried like a folded letter in the lining of our coat. My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 63 years old. And this is the story of how I finally told Thomas Hargrove I had loved him all along. For 42 years, I was married to James. He was a kind man, solid and dependable, with a crooked smile and eyes that always saw me, even in the mess of life. Ours was not a grand love affair, the kind you read about in yellowed paperbacks, but a sturdy, faithful, comforting kind of love. We built a life together, raised 2 children who'd grown up and scattered to corners of their own, kept the garden alive, even when the soil turned hard. We were partners, companions. And toward the end, I became his caretaker. When James got sick, everything slowed down. We stopped taking little trips. I stopped baking for pleasure and started cooking for necessity. The TV stayed on more. Hospice came, and they were kind, but the days grew heavier. It was Thomas, dear, dependable Thomas, who stepped in like he always had. Our old friend, my husband's best friend since college, the man who had been with us through every milestone. He would arrive on Thursday afternoons with a bag of groceries or flowers, sometimes an old record or a DVD of a classic movie. He knew James loved those old films. He would sit beside his bed, talk to him, feed him soup when I was too tired to stand. And every Thursday night, no matter what, we'd eat dinner together and watch Ghosts. Even when James could barely keep his eyes open, the show would play, and Thomas and I would sit on either side of his bed and laugh at all the silly antics like we always had. After James passed, the Thursday night tradition somehow remained. The first week, I expected it to end. I made tea and cried alone. But the next Thursday, Thomas knocked on the door, holding takeout from our favorite Thai place. He didn't say much. He just sat next to me and turned on the TV. I never told anyone about the feelings I had carried all those years. Never told James. Never even whispered them aloud to myself. But the truth was, from the first moment I met Thomas, back in 1979, at a 4th of July barbecue, something in me had shifted. He had this lopsided grin and a voice that made everything sound like poetry. I was already dating James by then, and I convinced myself it was just nerves. A silly crush. Something fleeting. But it wasn't. It settled in me quietly. A kind of secret warmth. Not something I acted on. Not something I even allowed myself to fantasize about. But I carried it. Through every year of marriage, through pregnancies and parenthood, through the loss of parents and the stress of work, through holidays and birthdays and heartbreaks. It lived in the space between glances and in the long, silent hugs when words fell short. I loved my husband, truly. But I also loved Thomas. That truth was something I folded away inside of me like a delicate note I dared not read. The months after James died were heavy with confusion. I mourned. I grieved. I wandered from room to room talking to ghosts. And through it all, Thomas was there. Not every day, not always in grand gestures, but in the reliable rhythm of Thursday nights and weekend phone calls. He took me grocery shopping. He fixed the porch light that kept flickering. He sat beside me at the cemetery on James's birthday. One New Year's Eve, a year after James had passed, I invited him over. I didn't want to be alone that night. I made lentil soup, poured us glasses of wine. We sat in front of the fireplace and listened to jazz on the radio. At midnight, I turned to wish him a happy new year, and then he kissed me. It wasn't long, it wasn't passionate. Just a quiet, brief, soft brush of lips against mine. A question more than a declaration. I didn't know what it meant. We didn't talk about it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of doubt and what-ifs. I replayed that kiss over and over, Wondered if it had even happened the way I remembered. Maybe it was just a friendly gesture. Maybe he was caught in the emotion of the moment. Weeks passed, then months. He kept showing up on Thursdays, kept being the same Thomas. Reliable, thoughtful, always a little distant. I kept waiting for him to bring it up, to say something, but he didn't. And then, 2 days before my birthday, I woke up with a sense of urgency. I was going to be 63. He was nearing 70. We were not young anymore. We didn't have endless years to dance around the truth. I had spent more than half my life burying a part of myself, and suddenly, the weight of that felt unbearable. So I made a decision. That evening, I invited him over like always. I lit candles. I wore a dress I hadn't touched in years. I made roast chicken and set the table for two. My hands shook when I poured the wine. He noticed something was different. "You okay?" he asked, brows knitting. "I'm fine," I said, "but there's something I want to tell you." He nodded slowly, the way he always did when he knew I was working through something important. "I've been carrying something for a long time, something I've never told anyone." He was quiet. He set his fork down and leaned back in his chair. "I've loved you for 40 years, Thomas. Since the moment I met you. I never did anything about it, never said a word, because I loved James and I made a promise to him, and to myself. But I think you should know now, because I don't want to leave this world having never told you." The room went still. He looked at me for a long moment, not with surprise, but with a sort of aching tenderness. Then he said, "I've loved you too." The air seemed to shift, like something had clicked into place. "I thought I'd missed my chance," he added. "I thought you never saw me that way. And then I thought it was too late." We didn't need to say much more that night. We sat in the stillness, holding hands, listening to the ticking clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Everything was changed, and yet everything felt exactly the same. In the months that followed, we moved gently, carefully. We took walks in the park, sat side by side at the movies, slow danced in the kitchen. Our relationship wasn't wild or dramatic. It was like coming home. People asked questions. Some were surprised, a few raised eyebrows. But most smiled, understanding that love, true love, doesn't always follow expected paths. Now, nearly a year later, I wake up with his hand in mine. I drink coffee while he reads the paper aloud. We still watch Ghosts every Thursday night, and every once in a while he'll kiss my shoulder and whisper, "I'm so glad you told me." So am I.